This video is sponsored by PCBWay. I'm retiring my Hexapod robot. I've spent the last year building it and it got to a point where it was working decently. I had this cool robot and I planned to do so many things with it. I wanted to add a robotic arm, vision, make it partially autonomous, make it dance and so much more. So why do I want to retire it? When I first started, everything went smoothly. I made the first leg in a few days and had it fully working in a week. But the further I got, the less progress I made. And eventually, the robot was just sucking up too much time. The sheer size of the robot was a big hurdle. For example, when I wanted to change a part of the leg, I had to do it 6 times because it's a hexapod. And when I wanted to change the body, I had to wait 10 hours for it to print, since it was so big. But what really sucked up the time was the initial design. When I first built the robot, I printed it in ABS, I used square nuts instead of heated inserts, I chose foam for the feet, etc. As I got further in the project, I noticed these flaws in my initial design. I didn't want to reprint the whole robot, so I just redesigned the worst parts. But those parts had to fit the original design, and so I was limited in how much I could improve them. For example, when I changed the feet from foam to silicone, I had to attach the silicone to a complex geometry. I spent a lot of time designing the mold and the attachment. Whereas if I had reprinted the legs, I could have just made the geometry simple and adding the silicone feet would have been a piece of cake. It was like fixing a house with a shitty foundation. You can't really do it unless you start from the base. However, the main reason I retired the robot was the remote control. I don't know if it's clear from the video, but it was real frustrating. Any RC model you buy, it's super easy to connect. You can just copy the code from a tutorial and it's supposed to work. And sometimes it did, but poorly. I tried many modules and tips, but it was never reliable. And without a remote controller, the robot was quite useless. If the robot was perfect and just the RC didn't work, I would have probably bought a pre-made controller, but considering the other flaws, I decided to retire it. Now I'm gonna answer some questions you might have. Was this robot a failure? Yes, I wanted to make a good and reliable hexapod, which I don't believe I did. Do I regret building it? No, even with the frustrating parts, which was at least half of the build, overall it was a good experience. Having so many problems at once was kind of harsh, but at least I got them out of the way and I learned a lot. Was this the right choice for a first project? No, I should have chosen a simpler build. When I chose to build a hexapod, I figured that the coding, CAD modeling, math and electronics were gonna be okay, and I thought that the hardware would be a challenge, since I had never used an Arduino before. I got this pretty much spot on apart from the hardware. That was a nightmare. Was finishing the robot the right choice? So halfway through the build, when all the problems started piling up, I considered quitting the project, but ultimately I completed it to the current version. Was this the right choice? Probably not. Apart from making my first PCB and using Blender, the latter half of the project was mostly fighting with the hardware, so I wasn't really doing anything interesting and I could have spent the time on a different project. Now, this whole video might make it sound like building the hexapod was a pure pain, but I don't see it that way. I finally built a robot. I've learned new skills. I have a better idea of what I want to build next, and seeing the hexapod walk in my garden was a huge achievement. I am glad I built this robot and I can't wait to build my next one. So what's next? Since the hexapod was my biggest project, I'm gonna fill the hole with a new one. First, I want to finish the CNC and I plan to do one small project as well. After that, I'm gonna start building a new robot. I'm gonna reduce the number of legs and make it smaller. I'm gonna use ESP32 since it has a built-in wireless communication. And I'm gonna use PCBs for everything to reduce the wiring. When I started building the hexapod, I avoided PCBs because I didn't want to design them. But when I tried it out, it wasn't hard at all. And the results speak for themselves. If you also want to upgrade your project with PCBs, you can check out my sponsor, PCBWay. The PCBs are cheap. Mine would have cost only $12 with shipping included, and it made my RC much better. And with PCBWay, you get a $5 discount for your first order. I am really excited to make another robot and I believe it will be much better. Thank you for following the Hexapod build, watch the main video if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.